Oh, how dark and suspicious. Okay, hey friends. So I've gotten to the point of... Are you gonna stay? I've gotten to the point of this project where I'm fatigued. All I want to do is read a fantasy novel, a romance novel, something that doesn't require my brain, okay? Because I'm not gonna lie to you, most of these have been flops, okay? They've been flops. And I'm disappointed. I don't want to read any of these books anymore. And it sucks because the next 4 I'm like the most interested in. Demon Copperhead, Trespassers, Marriage Portrait, and I'm a Fan. They're the ones that I'm most interested in, but I'm just so exhausted from reading books for this long list. Honestly, where am I going? I'm in the bathroom. I had coffee today. I had Vietnamese coffee and I feel like the coffee is hitting me now. She's hitting me now. I'm feeling hyper.
Hey everyone! So I have been here reading and I thought, you know what, I'm actually going to remember to do a 100-page update for Stoneblind by Natalie Haynes. I'm technically up to page 139, whatever. It's the fact that I'm doing this counts. So first impressions. First impressions of Stoneblind by Natalie Haynes. I think when you read the first page, which is from the Gorgonian, this little like situation, I had 2 reactions. My first reaction, okay, I'm liking this vibe, I'm enjoying this, but also it's slightly heavy-handed in the girl bossification of this story. And I have evidence to support this. Listen to this. These are just 2 quotes that I think really highlights what I'm trying to say here. I see you. I see all those who men call monsters. Okay, cool. Then this quote. This particular monster is assaulted, abused, and vilified. And yet, as story is always told, she is the one you should fear. She is the monster. We'll see about that. I just thought that was funny. And very much going into the idea that I was just saying, it's a bit heavy-handed in the girl bossification. I do understand why this book has slightly divided people though. I don't want to sound too picky, but this story up until this point, 139 pages, everything feels very surface level, okay? The characters at this point have no real substance. The story itself feels fragmented. I think that there's too many perspectives for this to feel like a coherent story at this point. Or not a coherent story, there's just too many perspectives, and I'm pretty sure the timelines are different with the gods. What I do think is good is that Natalie Haynes has made it a point to showcase how these gods and goddesses, they're not human. They're like otherworldly, and so their understanding of human morality is like not on the same page, not even in the same universe. You know what I'm saying? So I like that, but everything else, I don't really care about any of the characters. However, I do want to say Medusa, I feel, has had most of the character work, even though her chapters are still quite small. All of the characters, we'll say most of the characters are women, like the perspectives. So when we're talking about like mortal women, it's focusing on how these women are being punished for the actions of men, be that human men or gods. And that is also a theme that you find in like Ariadne by Jennifer Saint, Electra by Jennifer Saint, Circe by Madeline Miller. It's an ongoing theme. But although Medusa doesn't have much page time, I kind of consider her my favorite character. But this is not her story. But I'm only like at this point, 139 pages in, this is not Medusa's story. It's kind of all of these women's stories. And I'm not like, at the moment it's a criticism, but if you've read, I keep on going back to Jennifer Saint, but if you've read Electra and if you've read Ariadne, those two books, the titular characters, it's not just their story, right? With Ariadne, it's Ariadne's story and her sister, is it Phaedra? It's their story, right? Both of them loved it. In Electra, it's Electra, her mother Clytemnestra, and Cassandra. Is it just those three women? Or is it four women? I think it was those three women. But they all kind of come together. I am hoping that's what this is doing. I'm hoping that this is coming to a point where everything comes together, because right now I'm just like, I don't care. I think it's the writing. I think my criticism, I don't know. I think it comes down to the writing. I am not really vibing with it. I think it's just fine. I think this, up until this point, is just fine. And that's not what you want for a Women's Prize Longlist book. It's fine. I'm honestly kind of annoyed because Electra was, by Jennifer Saint, was so beautiful. And although she doesn't write incredibly flowery or super descriptive like Madeline Miller, Jennifer Saint's like beauty of her words is in the simplicity, and she's just able to convey so much with so little. And I love the way that she constructs her stories, especially Electra. I thought it was just really, really fantastic because it also had characters, well, specifically Electra, who her story is being given voice in this book, but she is kind of an antagonist. She's not a very likable character. You don't, like, on one hand, you cannot stand the sight of her, but on the other hand, especially towards the end, you kind of empathize with how everything resulted in the aftermath of her actions and her brother's actions, and she was given the brunt of the punishment. But I just thought Jennifer Saint did so well in this story and how she constructed it. This just feels like good ideas, but she should have like cut some out. Like Danae's, I don't know what I'm saying, but like I just think that there's so much happening. And like, yes, I understand Danae's story is important because she is the mother of Perseus. And obviously everything kind of comes together. So that's why I keep on saying like at this point, at this moment, currently, because I'm hoping that this changes. I'm not even halfway through. I'm hoping that by, like 250, I'm just like, okay, I see the vision. I understand what's going on. I'm obsessed. I want that for me and for you. I just want that. A friend of mine, Bess, just recently read this and she was like, it was fun. Like, it was fine, but it's not amazing. And I'm like, yeah, I feel like everyone's been saying that. I wish, though, that the decision-making of Athena or Athene in this was slightly explained a bit more. She was just like, because she forgot about it, that the incident happened of Poseidon raping Medusa in her temple. Not that she even knew who Medusa was. She just was like, oh, that girl. And she knew that he did something fucking wrong. But she forgot about it. And then she remembered it because she was like, oh, that weird feeling I got when I was battling the Titans. Like, what was that feeling? Oh, that's right. How dare he rape or seduce someone in my temple? She's like, I'm gonna punish him through her. I'm like, is that what? feel like it's not a very logical like reaction. But that's the point. Yeah, the point is that it's not logical, because sitting here as a human being, we're trying to put our human understanding of rationality onto these gods and goddesses who really don't give a fuck. But I wish that it got down a bit more in terms of why Athena decided to do that. Was it just to pay back? Why did you choose to do payback? Did you have an issue with Poseidon? Is it just like a pride thing? Is it because he was in your territory? Is this like your version of like pissing on a pole or something, like how dogs do? Like, is this about dominance? Like, what? I would have liked a bit more exploration of that, because it's like she just like stomped her foot. But maybe that's the point. Maybe there's no exploration needed, because it's just emphasizing how ridiculous they are. Did I answer my own question? Maybe I did. But we are going to see how this works. I also want to say there's these the chapters of the Gorgonean, which is essentially just like someone talking to you as the reader, being like, don't think that Perseus is the hero, because he is not the hero. He is a horrible boy who was spoilt. And like, yeah, I can get that. But you don't, I just feel like the heavy-handedness, you don't need to say it like that sometimes. I just feel like interweave that into the story or something. Anyway, I'm gonna continue reading. Hopefully everything changes and everything comes together and feels more cohesive and wonderful. I can't believe I forgot to update you on Stoneblind. Nothing that I'm going, like, I don't think I really want to add anything more to what I've just said in the update, because nothing really changed. I think Stoneblind had a lot of potential, but it ultimately, I think, failed in execution a little bit. I'm fine with reading a retelling that's not necessarily about the like titular character. Like, I'm fine with that. But when you advertise it so heavily as Medusa's story, and when you read it, it's not actually Medusa's story, it's Medusa, but it's the story of everyone else around her and how it got to the point of how we know Medusa as now, which kind of does a bit of a disservice, I think, to people who are going into this to read, you know, a retelling of Medusa, which is really sad. That was my issue. I think there was just so many perspectives. Like, keep it to 3. And what was the point? Truly, what was the point? This would have been so much better if you just stayed with Medusa and had maybe like 2 other perspectives. It was just absolutely ridiculous. I think Medusa's page time was maybe like 10%, not even. It was stupid. And let's just talk about the writing, because for me the writing was the biggest issue. I didn't like the writing. It was so, like, it wasn't even simple, because there are still so many books that have simple writing that are still so impactful and wonderful. This was just so boring. Like, that's what it was. It was dull. It was dull. I was so disappointed. And maybe I was comparing it to like Jennifer Saint and Madeline Miller. But the amount of like hype that Natalie Haynes has, I was expecting so much more in terms of her writing. Everything felt super superficial. Like, everything felt surface level. The feminist aspect of it felt so heavy-handed, which I know sounds a bit stupid, but you can be feminist in a retelling without being like, hear me roar. Like, I get it, but there was no real depth to it. There was no real exploration to anything pertaining to Medusa's story. I didn't understand the purpose of having Athena's perspective. Like, okay, she too is within a construct that is oppressive and kind of coercive, but she makes her own very terrible decisions. Like, are we supposed to feel sorry for her? No. Well, sometimes, yes, we do. because things happen to her that are horrible, and it only happens because she's a woman. The only thing that I liked about this book was that it depicted the gods and goddesses as the opposite of human. Like, they did not align themselves with any sort of like human morality. They were very much these alien entities. They had their own, you know, way of living and their own systems of understanding the world around them, which I think was the only real strength to this book. And again, I think me having read Electra this year by Jennifer Saint did a disservice to Stoneblind, because in comparison, there is no comparison. Stoneblind was just such a bland retelling. It, I think, did nothing unique, really. It wasn't really about Medusa. It was a very strange way of retelling. I don't know, I just wasn't happy with it. I wish that Medusa actually was able to be a proper character, to call it Medusa's story, but then not actually have Medusa narrating her own story for most of the book. I feel like that's a bit ridiculous. I don't know, but I just, yeah, there's nothing really to say to this. Kind of disappointed. I feel like I would only really recommend, and I can understand why people like it though, if you're like a beginner in the retelling genre, like Greek myths and stuff, this might be a good place to start, because it's very simple and very easy to read. Like, I'll have to hand it to it and say, like, I read it quickly, I'm pretty sure. And I think, you know, maybe people do more enjoy the, like, having the gods perspective in these types of retellings. I don't think I'm that kind of gal, unless it's like a retelling of a god or goddess. I prefer just to keep it chill. Okay, with the mortals, maybe. So maybe that was an aspect of it that I didn't enjoy. I don't know. It was just not a book for me. But it will be a book for many others. What else do I want to say? So I can understand why it's on the long list. I just don't think it was for me. That's all I'm gonna say about it. Yeah, okay. On to the next book. Hey everyone. This is gonna be a really quick update. I finished Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver and I really loved it. I really loved it. Why is this jumper so weird? I really loved it. I don't know what else to say. The way that I feel about this book, interestingly, is probably very similar, if not the same, as to how I felt about David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. Just this being just so immersed and captivated by our narrator, by our main character, in this case Damon or Demon, and just wanting him to be happy. Just to find some semblance of peace and happiness. I couldn't stop reading. When I say that, I mean it. If I wasn't able to physically read this, like if I had to drive somewhere or do like housework, I was putting in the audiobook. Like, I could not stop reading it. It was so wonderful. It's a very, very well done book. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily without flaws. I think it didn't necessarily need to be this big. My personal humble opinion, I think it's slightly dragged just a bit towards like the middle end, but I felt the exact same way with David Copperfield. I also think that a lot of the women characters don't necessarily get a lot of depth to them, but again, this is completely from Demon's perspective. This, you know, it's not a multi-perspective, it's not like third person, so we only get everything from Demon's eyes. So I think obviously that would mean that characters such as Agnes or Angus and Dory are not necessarily like fully rounded characters. Well, they are, but I wanted more because, like David Copperfield, Agnes is my, like, the best, one of the best characters. So I just wanted more. I just wanted more of Agnes. But yeah, this was really good. This was really fucking good. I went to a bookstore yesterday. I didn't buy anything, but I just went because I had to go and get my mum. And I went to a bookstore and I was looking at the Longlist. They had like this, like a shelf with all of the, it's like all the book awards and most of the books on those book awards, like the Stellar Shortlist, I should say, and the WomensPrize Longlist. And we just got to talking, and this was her favorite book of last year. And I was like, yeah, I can definitely understand that because this book is incredible. And she told me to read, is it The Poisonwood Bible? The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. She thinks it's one of her best. So I'm definitely, after having read this, I'm definitely on the lookout for more Barbara Kingsolver. I just loved it. I loved the way it was written. I loved him. I loved Demon. Like, also, I think that this, well, obviously, like, I'm not a man and I wasn't a teenage boy, but she wrote teenagehood really well, you know, with like authenticity. It, like, Demon throughout this, he's just, the way that he develops as a boy to a man, and just his experiences with life and his thought processes and everything, him being confronted with ideas like surrounding like racism and classism and privilege, like, it just really made sense how it was written. Like, you could feel like Damon was a real person, if that made sense. Again, similar to how I felt with David Copperfield. I was obsessed with David Copperfield when I read it. Like, similar to this, if I wasn't physically reading it, I was listening to it, taking my dog for walks and doing all bits and bobs, because I was just so in love with the story. And that's literally the same thing, like with this. My same experience I had with David Copperfield, I had with Demon Copperhead, which I love. I love that for me. I love that for all of us. I would say though, don't read this, and I think I've already said this, have I? Don't read this if you've just read David Copperfield within the last year. Don't do that. Like, you have to have some time between the two, I think, because it is very, like, it's a retelling in like modern era, different setting, etc. But the foundation, like the framework of the story is the same. What I really also loved is that the start of the way, like this, the way that this book is, oh my god, I can't speak. The way this book starts, holy shitballs. First, I got myself born. A decent crowd was on hand to watch, and they've always given me that much. The worst of the job was up to me, my mother being, let's just say, out of it. It's an allusion to the beginning of David Copperfield. Like, the entire, like, first, it's in reference directly to David Copperfield. I will show you. Yes, I'm wearing blue and pink. Let's not talk about it. This is my edition of David Copperfield. Love it so much. Chapter 1. Whether I shall turn out to be the hero of my own life, or whether the station will be held by anybody else, these pages must show. To begin my life with the beginning of my life, I record that I was born, as I have been informed and believe, on a Friday at 12 o'clock at night. It was remarked that the clock began to strike and I began to cry simultaneously. First, I got myself born. Like, it's just so cool. I loved that. Yeah, the way that it ended, oh, that like hopefulness, like, it was just so good. I really loved it. It was a book for me. Very happy about that. I'm trying to persuade my mum to read it, but I think the size of it is intimidating her, which, like, it shouldn't. She's reading all her yesterdays by Natalia Ginsburg. still, but she's started another book. My mum's really funny. And she's also reading that one by Anthony Doerr, what's All the Light We Cannot See. She's also reading that. I think she's reading that now more so than all our yesterdays, because she just wants something not as dense. But I'm trying to tell her this is actually quite easy to read and quite fast paced most of the time. And by fast paced, I don't mean that it's action packed. I mean like you constantly want to read. But I loved this. It's one of the highlights of the long list, I have to say. At this moment in time, the highlights of the long list are, and by highlights I mean everything above like 5 stars and 4.5 stars. So we have Demon Copperhead, we have Wandering Souls, and Cursed Bread. Pretty sure, oh my god, I kind of was expecting a bit more 5-star reads from this long list, and most of them have been like 3, 3.5 or 4. And like the 4-star reads I still think are fantastic, like Fire Rush. And what else was there? I don't remember. But I think that it's kind of surprising to me that I've only rated 3 books above 4.5 stars. But I think we should talk about future plans, right? So I finished Demon Copperhead. What's next? I'm going to start Trespassers by Louise Kennedy, because I have to give that book back to the library next week. So I should probably read it. And I think after that, I'm going to see if I can source I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. So when I was at the bookstore yesterday, I asked the wonderful bookseller Fiona, I was like, hey, I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. Like, what's the go? And she's like, oh my god, it's so annoying. It doesn't come out in Australia until May 9th. And she was talking about how frustrating it is because she wanted to like read as many of the books of the long list as well. But yeah, I was also saying like how annoying, because I really want to read the long list. So I can't find the physical copy of the book anywhere, but I'm pretty sure I can find the ebook on Amazon. I'm pretty sure on Amazon you can buy the Kindle edition for like $10. And I really hope I'm not wrong, because I really want to read it. So I'll most likely have to read that as an ebook, because my library doesn't have it. Everything, everywhere, I'm a Fan is on order, like, because it hasn't come out yet. Because I've been on the library list for what feels like 84 years, but it's not. It's only a few weeks. But nothing's changed. It's still on order, still on order. And I'm like, why is it on order? Like, it's out. It's not in Australia. The paperback version isn't out in Australia yet. Doesn't come out, according to every bookstore that I've looked at, doesn't come out till May. And I'm hoping to read that on the weekend. Actually, I'm really excited about I'm a Fan. I am very excited about I'm a Fan. I was looking at very briefly, because I was like, I don't want to read anything more. There was on Amazon, when you're looking at Kindle editions, if you scroll a bit down, sometimes it shows you the most highlighted passages. And I read the first one, and I was like, this is like my kind of book. We already talked about how I love books about obsession and fixation and just like women's wrongs. So I love that for me. I'm really hoping that I can buy the Kindle edition. It should work. If it's available, I should be able to buy it. I'm excited. So I finished a book. I finished Trespassers by Louise Kennedy. This took me a few days to read, purely because I was just so exhausted. But this was great. And I kind of knew that I was going to enjoy it, because so many other people have enjoyed it. A friend of mine, Bess, really loved this book, and we kind of have similar reading tastes. So I knew that I was going to go into it enjoying it, and golly gosh, did I ever. I don't know much about Irish history, so this was brilliant in kind of learning more about the historical context. The main character, Kushla, I really liked. Okay, maybe I should say what the book is about. So we center on Kushla. She is 24 years old. She's a teacher, like a kind of a primary school teacher at a Catholic school in Ireland, and she also helps out with her family's pub. Now, where she lives, it's like a mixed community of both Protestant and Catholic, from what I understand. But at this time, Catholics are essentially like, yeah. It's like, I'm guessing Protestant is the British rule and Catholics are like Irish people. Is that what it is? I don't know much about Irish history. I need to research it, because it was really fascinating and violent and kind of horrible, and a lot of what happens in this book I didn't know, but it's very violent. It's kind of like a civil war, and there's just murder happening in the name of like Protestantism or Catholicism and like who they're affiliated with. So Kushla is kind of like in the center of it all, and the way that this book is written, Kushla is in the center and everything else is happening around her. So you kind of see her in this bubble of like her own life, and then that bubble kind of punctures in a really big way, and then you see kind of more of what's happening around her. And so at the pub she meets this man named Michael, and Michael is in his 50s and he is a barrister. So he's like, the power dynamics already are very, very like not good, they're unequal, but he's also married with a son. And I don't think necessarily you're wanting, like, you're not rooting for them to be happy, essentially, basically, from like my own personal subjective experience of this book. Michael is not a great guy, and Kushla is not obsessed with him, but kind of. She loves him, I guess, and Michael claims that he loves her, but I don't really believe anything that he says. If a man uses justification that his wife is sick because his wife is, I'm pretty sure, an alcoholic, if he justifies his cheating because of that, and he's done it multiple times, like, he's not a guy that you want to happy ever after with. And that's like the gist of the story. It's kind of like this like love story was always doomed from the start. So you have Michael and Kushla in their own little bubble, and there are things that happen outside of it that you realize at the end were kind of like foreshadowing, and then something really happens. Michael gets killed, and in like a really weird coincidence, it's a boy who kills Michael that Kushla is kind of friendly with. I don't know, she's the teacher of the boy that killed Michael's brother, Davy. So you meet the McGowans, and Tommy McGowan is the one who eventually kills Michael. You find out later that it literally had nothing to do with Kushla. It was just Tommy at the right place at the right time saw Michael, a very pronounced man. He's a barrister, he's also Protestant. So people on the Catholic side, was it the IRA? I'm not too sure. Decided, you know what, I think it might make a really clear statement if this man was killed. So Kushla's world is kind of upended, and I thought it was really interesting in how it was written, because you have Kushla again in a bubble, but she's also really connected with the McGowans because Davy is her student, and they were kind of struggling because the father was nearly beaten to death because he was Catholic, I'm pretty sure, but he married a Protestant woman, and they're essentially like a mixed family, and on both sides people don't really view the McGowans in a very positive way. So Kushla, you know, helps out the family, and it's kind of a bit heartbreaking in a way, like what happens with the McGowans. And this like running thread throughout this book is kind of like this hypocrisy of religious institutions, and just the rhetoric that is used, especially by the priest at the Catholic school, is really, you know, it's not helping matters. And in a time where love and kind of empathy would be really helpful, especially to like kids like Davy, it just wasn't there. So you have like this like thread that's happening as well of religion, which, you know me, love that sort of stuff. I just think this was a really good quality book. I think Louise Kennedy is an author that I think will be doing really great things. I don't know, is that something that you also get? And the way that it ended, like the prologue and the epilogue, so to speak, really loved that. I think it was just beautiful. I think Kushla deserved obviously so much more, but I think a lot of the implications of like a young 20-year-old woman being swept away by a man in his 50s who has gone around the block a few times, you know, is a barrister. He is like, there is just so much in that relationship that was unequal, and you see that because Kushla is like literally like would drop everything for him because he would decide to finally call her up. It really reminded me of I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel, as well as Cursed Bread. So these three books, very connected, and I see that. I really enjoyed it. I don't really have much else to say. Was there anything else to say? I just think it was a really well written book, very engaging, very interesting. I was thinking about this book when I wasn't reading it, and I can definitely see why it was on a long list. And I can also see why, spoiler alert, this book eventually goes onto the short list. Will it win? I don't think so, but it was just great. It was great. Very happy about that. But yeah, Trespassers by Louise Kennedy. And I just think it's really cool. I'm showing my nerd, but is the book title in reference to the Our Father? Because I see what you did there, Kennedy. I see what you did there. Love that. I enjoyed this. This was good. I think Irish fiction is something that I need to more fully get into. I have a few on my shelf and a couple that I haven't read yet, but I think every time I read Irish fiction, or like fiction written by an Irish author, I always have a good time. Always have a good time. Like even here you see like Sally Runes, the Runes, Catherine Pacifica. We have, is Claire Keegan Irish? I'm pretty sure Claire Keegan's Irish. Louise Kennedy. There are other authors that I've read that I'm not remembering at the moment. I need to get more into Irish fiction because it's always a good time for me. It's always something that I'm enjoying. But that's my update for Trespassers. I'll see you soon. Excuse how I look, but I'm reading The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell and I am loving it. I just wanted to read this out to you. He strides towards the door, he being Alfonso, so Lucrezia has just married Alfonso. He strides towards the door, his shirt inflating with air, then quickly doubles back, as if he has forgotten something, pacing across the floor to her again. He bends at the waist and, sliding a hand around her neck, stoops and presses his lips to hers, a brief, emphatic pressure. It reminds her of her father, bringing his seal down on top of a document, marking it as his. Oh my god, this book is so good. This book, I don't even know how to explain to you how much I'm loving the marriage portrait. Okay, I'm gonna continue reading now. Hey everyone. Okay, I have like 2 books to talk to you about. It's been a while actually. Sorry. I kind of had like a little mental breakdown, it's fine. And then I randomly got like sick. So, but I'm here now and I have some updates. So I read I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. I loved it. I loved it. Oh my god. I'm gonna really talk about this briefly, but this was so good. So I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel is about a woman who is in a relationship, but she's also having an affair with a man who's married and who is having an affair with our narrator, but he also has many other affairs. So you're literally dropped into this woman's story, how she's like stalking this woman online on Instagram, and you find out that this woman also was having an affair with like the same man, and she was just like obsessed with this woman and like what is different about her and like what she kind of provides this man that they're both sleeping with. It's a bit insane when you first get into it, but I finished it in like 2 hours. What happens? Actually, I don't even know if I'm going to tell you. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to tell you. What happens is this really fascinating exploration. If you hear my mom talking in the background, I apologize. But it's a really fascinating exploration, not only of like obsession and love, but also of class and the legacies of colonization and violence and misogyny and what else. It was just, the way that it was written, I don't think anyone else is doing what Sheena Patel is doing, because you go from describing like an Instagram post that our narrator is looking at about this like woman that she's obsessed with, and it goes from that into this really detailed and like impactful discussion on the difference in like class and wealth and privilege. And I was consistently blown away. Like, from the onset, you don't think that that's what you're going to get, but that is what you get. And our narrator is going through it. She is going through it. She's in a relationship with a guy that she's just kind of stuck in a rut. Like, she doesn't really love him. She's kind of abusive towards her boyfriend. Not kind of, she is abusive. She's kind of a terrible person. And you see that because of how she's being treated by the man she's having an affair with, the man that she supposedly loves, the more that she not lacks control, but has no control in that relationship, she kind of puts it on her boyfriend. And it's a really sad dynamic, and you don't necessarily go into this book and like finish this book liking the main narrator. You kind of think she's terrible, but you can understand parts of her, but still, you know, hate the other parts. I think there was also something that happened around her parents. I don't know if she had childhood trauma, but there was a lot going on. She's a very complex character, very has many depths. But her relationship with the man that she has an affair with, who is this very wealthy man, was so toxic. It was so toxic. And as a reader, you're just like, why? Why do you want him? He is literally so pathetic. But she doesn't see that. And, you know, all she wants is for him to like leave his wife and like stop having other affairs with other women and just like be with her. And it's like, babe, the fact that he is having an affair on his wife, the fact that he can't even be faithful to one woman, because it's different if like you're not into monogamy, but he claims that he's into monogamy, right? And he just like laughs it off. He's like, ha ha ha, I'm just the way I am. Like, be open about that, you know? If you can't be monogamous, be open about it. Don't lay claim to monogamy, right? And she is in her own bubble, and the way it ends, all I remember was being like, that's it, I need more. Like, it was just, it made, like, the ending made sense, but also I wanted so much more. I think my copy on, like, I had to buy it on Kindle because the physical copy does not exist in Australia yet. I think it's being released like today or tomorrow. It was only maybe like 200 pages, and it just went so quickly, not only because it was so short, but it was also written in very small sections. It was just so wonderful. But like the content wasn't like the subject matter wasn't wonderful, but it was just a very, very unique story. It reminded me heavily of Cursed Bread. I think it's the obsession, fixation element to it. I just had a great time reading that. Again, I was in bed, randomly picked it up. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna read this right now. And I finished it that night, like within 2 hours. I couldn't put it down. That's what it does to you. Don't read it though if you don't enjoy books like that, because this would be a very divisive book. I can understand why it isn't being as hyped as some of the books on the long list. I feel like this is a very divisive book, but if you are like me and you love this type of like kind of like Ottessa Moshfegh, Sally Rooney, Rachel Yoda type of story, then this is for you. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. But you don't leave the book thinking, oh my god, what a wonderful character, what a wonderful story. It's not one of those books. It's very, like it feels heavy, if that makes sense. Anyway, moving on. That's I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel done. And then I read what I think is my favourite book on the long list, because I thought it was Demon Copperhead, but it does not, for me, live up to this book. This might be a really big surprise to people, because I love Demon Copperhead. But The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell, spectacular. My favourite book on the long list. This is my favourite book on the long list. The Marriage Portrait was freaking brilliant. It was brilliant. It was wonderful. It was spectacularly written. I loved how this was written. I loved Lucrezia. I loved the history. I loved everything about it. I took a while to finish this book purely because I didn't want to finish this book. I was on like 200 mark for so long because I just didn't want to finish it. Literally. If you don't know what this is about, I'm going to keep it very vague. But it is about our main narrator, Lucrezia de Medici. You may know her. She's the daughter of Cosimo I de Medici and Eleonora de Medici, who was something of Spain. She came from Spain. She was not a princess, was she? Oh, I forget. Anyway, but if you know any sort of like Renaissance history, the Medicis essentially controlled Florence for a time, and you are introduced to Lucrezia. She's not like other girls. No. She's always kind of been the outsider of her family, and her mother Eleonora essentially says the reason why Lucrezia is the way she is because during the making of the six, Eleonora was not focusing on the act with her husband. She was like making decisions and thinking about things and, you know, being like, should I use this land? as like a new city, or should I use it? And she was just like making plans in her head because she's a boss bitch. But that's like the reason that is allocated to why Lucrezia is so different from her brothers and sisters. Lucrezia is wonderful. Ugh, I loved her so much. She is just a girl who wants to draw and paint. Let her be. Let her be. But it's not a spoiler. The very first like page is Lucrezia saying, my husband is going to kill me. And that is the entire story of this book. You go in like 2 alternating timelines, essentially. It's like you're growing up with Lucrezia until the moment she is married, and then going back to that, or going forward to that point where she thinks that she's about to get murdered from her husband. So in a horrible turn of events, her older sister Maria dies because of a sickness, and Maria was supposed to marry this man named Alfonso. Now Alfonso is, what's his last name? Oh my god. He's Alfonso Ferrara, right? Yeah. Alfonso the Duke of Ferrara. Oh my god, I can't even say that. Maria dies. The Ferrara family is like, you know what? How sad. But you have another daughter, we'll just have her. And Cosimo is like, you know, don't want to do that. He essentially says yes because, you know, back in those days, maybe you could argue even still now, the purpose of daughters was just to like marry them off for the betterment of the kingdom, because they were just essentially property. So at the age of 13, Lucrezia is engaged to be wed. But what happens is it is delayed for 2 years. So instead of 13, she's 15 and gets married to Alfonso. I won't tell you how it gets delayed, but let's just say Sophia, she's a bad bitch and I loved her so much. So Lucrezia meets her husband. She thinks, okay, like, you know, this could be okay. Like, I gotta, you know, smell the roses. This is my life now. She had a lot more freedom. She could do whatever she wanted. But Alfonso, not the greatest of men. And there's this running, like, not theme, but like image that he's a man with 2 faces. So on one hand, and the way that Lucrezia like categorizes them is like, one is my husband, the other is like this unknown feral man. He's the leader, like the Duke of Ferrara, because he's mentally not well. Okay, the violence and the control that this man, this book makes you so angry. It makes you so angry. The way that he treats the women in his life. Lucrezia, unfortunately, is but one. The way that he treats his sisters, ridiculous. Like, anyway, but Lucrezia tries to find the joy, even when that joy is like being slowly leached out of her. And obviously, like a year, not even a year into their marriage, Alfonso is starting to get a bit annoyed that Lucrezia hasn't popped out an heir. Now, when this was happening, you meet Alfonso's sisters, and they're both interesting women. But one of them, Elisabetta, she says, essentially be careful, because Alfonso has had many women and has many women, but there is no illegitimate son or daughter. There is a reason for that, but he will blame you, and like, just be ready and be careful. Lucrezia is still 15 years old. She's a child, and the pressure and the stress that is on her, she absolutely detests when he has sex with her. She does not want it at all, at any point. She absolutely hates it. It's just so horrible to read. Like, the marriage portrait, I feel like it's a psychological thriller. I was on the edge of my seat because I was terrified of what's going to happen to Lucrezia. And the way that it happens, the way that this story is written, just everything about the marriage portrait by Maggie O'Farrell is brilliant. It's brilliant. And I don't know if it's because I have a very soft spot for Renaissance Florence. I studied Renaissance Florence for a very long, like, well, 2 years in high school and then like another 2 years in uni. Like, I loved Renaissance Florence, Renaissance Italy history, Renaissance Italian history, I should say. I just have a very special place in my heart for it. And I recently went to Florence. I know I'm bragging, but some of the things, like some of the places that is spoken about in this book, I've been to. Like, it was just so insane. And I loved it. I loved it so much. I loved it so much. I think for me, it was Lucrezia. Lucrezia, if you don't fall in love with Lucrezia, I think, like, maybe you won't have the same reaction as I had with the marriage portrait, but I fell in love with her. I love her as a character. She's just so wonderful. I want to protect her, and in my head, she is just living her best life. And it's really interesting because at the end of the book, you have like author's notes, and Maggie O'Farrell talks about like the, you know, creative license that she took for a few of the things that she talks about, but also about the fact that, like, historically Alfonso had 2 other wives and he never had children. Like, what a cunt. What an absolute cunt. But then it also talks about 2 other men in the author's notes, and if you haven't read it and you don't care, like, you can continue listening, but if you want to read it and you don't want any of the author's notes to be spoiled, which I do understand, then thanks so much for watching. But in the author's notes, I was talking about how Isabella, who is Lucrezia's sister, she married Pietro. Did she marry Pietro? Anyway, so Isabella married someone and she was found dead in a very suspicious way. And then Lucrezia's brother, his wife, started with a D. Dianora, oh my god. Dianora was also suspiciously found dead. And I think it was with Pietro, who Isabella's death, like her cousin Dianora, now married to the youngest Medici brother Pietro, she also died. And so in a report by a man who I think was like this, not a spy, but like he was going through the courts, and he wrote to Alfonso II, he said that Dianora was strangled by a dog leash by Don Pietro. Like, he fully just like says it out loud. And finally died after a great deal of struggle. Don Pietro bears a sign having 2 fingers on his hand injured from the bite of the lady. These men got away with murdering their wives. That's essentially what this is about. I loved it. This is brilliant. I think this is my favorite book on the long list. I don't know what else to say. I think before I like log off and actually, I can't believe I finish this series, I'm just going to talk about the long list overall. Controversial opinion, I don't think this long list was very good. I think there were a lot of books, there were a few books that were outstanding, but a lot of them were just fine. And I think I've already said this before, but I'm kind of disappointed in the long list for the Women's Prize this year. I think that a lot of books that were definitely like worthy of this list fell to the wayside. I'm still bitter about Pod. I honestly cannot believe that it made the shortlist, but in saying that, like, I shouldn't have even been on the long list. I just think that out of 16 books, I only really loved 4. Is it 4? Marriage, Demon, Wandering Souls, Cursed Bread. I'm a fan. I've read 5, sorry, 5. I loved 5 out of 16. I don't know. I feel like usually the Women's Prize is like hit after hit with maybe 1 or 2. I'm just like, ugh. But this time around, I got reading fatigue doing this because I read so many books back to back that were just mediocre. I don't know. I really hope that next year the long list is incredible. I'm also really excited for the Booker Prize this year. I wonder, because if you don't know, the Demon Copperhead just tied for the Pulitzer. So it's going to be really interesting to see what's on the Booker this year. In terms of predicting the winner of this prize, I don't know. I would love to say The Marriage Portrait, but I think Demon Copperhead has a really good chance. So I'm gonna say one of those two. But that's it for today. That's the end of the series. I can't believe we're here. But at the same time, thank God. What was your favourite book of the long list? My favourite is Marriage Portrait, obviously. Demon Copperhead. Oh, is Demon Copperhead second or is Wandering Souls second? No, I think Demon Copperhead and then Wandering Souls. Then I think it might be I'm a Fan. Oh, my Glory. Oh my God, I keep on forgetting Glory because I read it already. I loved Glory. I think that's my second position. And then it's Demon Copperhead. And then it's, yeah. Okay, sorry. Keep on forgetting about Glory. I'm not going to talk about Glory because I've already spoken about it here and there. If you've like watched this series and if you've watched my reaction to the shortlist as well as a few other like videos, I'll just leave it down below. I'll also have a blog post where I talk about reading it for the Booker shortlist. I loved Glory. It was brilliant, spectacular. I would also hope that would win, but I really don't think it would. My top 3 contenders: Marriage, Demon, Glory. I love those 3 so much. They have very special places in my heart. I'm gonna go now, my throat's sore. Thank you so much for watching this series. Thank you so much for your support. Would not be here without you. I will see you next week. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye friends.